only good things can happen to you when you're vulnerable, when you speak up.
Yes,
You
and
either
bold.
get what
And
you want or you get what you
mhm.
need. And both things serve you every single time. You get what you want. That is, you speak up and you're yourself, or you ask a question of clarity. They give you the answer you want. And they're like, well, thanks for asking that. We're on the same page. Or they say, no, forget it. I don't want to date you. And you got what you need. And now you're free to go out and get what you deserve. Either way, speaking up always serves you. And I think 99% of our problems can be solved with communication, which, we're not going to solve the world's problems with just that statement. But I really do think leaning into vulnerability in the form of conversations is going to solve a lot of your problems.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Let's Talk Love. I'm Robin Ducharme, and I am so happy to be welcoming our guest, Case Kenny, today to Let's Talk Love. Thanks for being with us, Case, from Miami.
Yeah, of course. Thanks for having me. This will be great. I'm excited.
It is great. I had a lot of fun listening to your book and reading your book. I love having both the physical copy as well as listening to you. You narrated your own book. Thank you very much for that, because sometimes authors don't.
No,
And it's great. It's great to have your voice come across and your humor and your wit. And I thought it was an excellent book. Like
thank you
absolutely
so
excellent.
much. Well,
How,
thank you.
what have the, tell me, what have the reviews been? Because I know you've got a huge audience on your podcast and, you've written other books, but tell me what's the experience been?
Well, I think it aligns with my general experience on the internet, which is like I feel like sometimes I'm the exception. Everyone's so nice to me. Like I
Well, I
get
hope
hate
so.
occasionally, of course, but it's like everyone is just so supportive. So I sometimes honestly feel like I'm in La La Land. So everyone has been very supportive of the book. I mean, I've been on the Today Show talking about it. Like I released it almost like a year and a half ago, and even like I'm selling more copies now than I was in the beginning. So yeah, not to toot my horn, but it's just been a great experience. I'm glad that people resonate with it. Writing a book, it isn't about me. It's about people and serving them the best I can, and it seems to do that, and people enjoy it. And yeah, came from my heart and my experience. So it's easy. It's easy to write things like that. You're not trying to be someone you're not. It's not you're not reinventing the wheel with it. It's simple, and I think people appreciate that because I like simple. So yeah, it's been great.
And that's one of the things you talk about in the book is bringing more. It's not so much about being better or having more. It's about, which I appreciate. I'm at a place in my life right now. I want to bring more simplicity into my life, and so it's maybe about creating a different life and more simplicity rather than more and better. That was like really one of the underlying messages in your
Yeah,
book.
I sure think so. I mean, I'm always for like doing better in the sense of like doing
Yes.
better than yourself yesterday. But I mean, you and I could probably talk for an hour here about the pressure and just human, just, how we're conditioned to always want more of something and better versions of something. And I think a lot of that comes from the other topics of comparison and, insecurity and things like that. But I don't know if it's me getting into my mid 30s or just really learning to practice what I preach and doing all these things. But I think simplicity is luxury, and I'm not talking about simplicity in the sense of like being boring. I'm just talking in the sense of being secure in who you are and what you have, and not feeling doubt because there's always a bigger version or someone who has more money or someone who's better looking or whatever it may be. I just think we're not on this earth to always be chasing that. And I think coming home to a simpler version of yourself, and while also having mile high ambitions and holding yourself and your friends and your partner to a high standard, but just craving that simplicity over blindly chasing more. I think that's a gift, and it gives you all the other things that you want: peace and confidence. And so it's kind of the foundation for them.
Yeah. Okay, so your book is called That's Bold of You. How
Right.
to Thrive as Your Most Vibrant, Weird, and Real Self. I wore my bold shirt today just for this case. Well, it's kind of bold, but
It
I was
looks
like,
amazing. It's a great shirt.
Well, thank you.
I'm
No,
not
but
qualified to give a great review. It's a solid shirt. It looks like a great shirt.
so I no, but really, first I want to ask you about your audience. Who is your demographic? Because I read your book and I got so much out of this. And I was talking. One of my best friends, my best friend Chris and I work together. We read the books. We study. We look at all the people we're going to talk to, and learn from you, and then get together and be like, what did you get? What did you glean from the book and from Case this week? And we're both like, there was a lot of great reminders. Like we're both in our mid 40s, both mothers, a lot of things that we have in common. But I wondered, out of the millions of people that you're talking to, that relate to you, that are influenced by you, what's your demographic? Like, who are the people that you are really like coaching?
Yeah, well, I would say in general, I don't like try to write for a particular person. I've always written for me, and I've always spoken for me. The outcome of that has been that it's a lot of women as a demographic. As a
Yeah.
more like psychographic, though, it's people who just want to make sure that they have a point of view in life. I find a lot of people come to me after breakups, men and women, because that's a confusing time and they don't know, like, what is my truth any longer? What is my identity any longer? So I see that a lot. I see a lot of people come to my writing and podcast just at crossroads in life, new beginnings, traumas, things like that. And I think that's great. A lot of women, I love the women who support me. They're so vocal and have aided me immensely. A lot of men support me as well. They're just not as vocal, and I think we could have a conversation around why that's the case. But yeah, I think somewhere in there is the universal truth of people want clarity in their lives, and my content isn't designed to give people clarity. It's to give people questions and perspectives so that they can create their own clarity. And it's been great to see that go in different directions. Like this past weekend, I was in Las Vegas speaking for the Raiders, an NFL team. So all grown men, huge adult men, and that was really cool. And I've done, I do a lot of speaking. I speak to women's groups and do all these things, but it's always the same thing, and we always end up having the same conversation. So there's such a universality to the message. At this point, I just speak to the need, not a particular group or anything.
Right. There are a lot of universal messages in your work, in your book. So tell me, you are a mindfulness, you've been practicing mindfulness for a lot of years. And you talk about mindfulness being practical self-awareness. So I think mindfulness can be looked at in many different ways. So tell us from your perspective, what does mindfulness mean to you, and how do you practice that so it's practical self-awareness. Can you
Yeah.
describe that for us?
For sure. Yeah. Mindfulness is one of those things where there's no right definition.
No.
There's no wrong definition. So it's fantastic. I think about myself in my 20s. I used to be, I wouldn't say like anti-mindfulness or anything, or anti-self-help. I was just always like a little bit of a cynicist. Like, who are people to tell me what to do? You hear things like mindfulness and meditation, and then you start hearing the folks talk about vibrations and attracting abundance. And it honestly always seems so cheesy to me, because it never seemed to be backed by like a point of truth or a point of reference. It always seems so just like la-di-da. And I think that turned me off from it for a while, and perhaps other people too. And what I've realized, is to what you just said as well. It's like mindfulness is the most practical thing in the world. And the point that I've added to it, like we could mostly agree that mindfulness in some form or another is the art of being present in your feelings. It's the art of accepting your feelings. It's the art of radical presence in your emotions, putting your feelings on trial, examining them, not running from them. I think it's a great definition, listening to yourself. The thing that I'm passionate about, that I try to bring through in my writing, on Instagram, on the podcast, is that doesn't really exhibit the true value of a mindfulness practice or a mindfulness as a whole. Mindfulness is listening to yourself, but more importantly, it's learning to talk to yourself. And that's what I'm all about.
Yes.
Like, because if you're only listening to yourself, there's a lot of great value there. And that's a huge part of the process. You have to be grounded in saying, I feel this way. Here's where it's coming from. Let's get real and vulnerable. But a lot of our thoughts are crap. Like, if you're into any
Yes.
like the work on consciousness or Michael Singer, like we're not necessarily originating a lot of our thoughts and feelings. A lot of them are bogus and we're just receiving them. It's our job to listen to them and then figure out what to do with them. And that figuring out what to do can take many different forms. The form that I gravitate towards for its practicality is putting human language behind it in an uplifting way. I mean, I feel like my work is pretty pointed in its effort is to spread optimism, and it's to do it with relatable language. And that's learning to talk to yourself. And you could boil that down and call it, working on your internal dialogue or whatever it may be. But for me, mindfulness is the art of listening to yourself and talking to yourself. And
Yes.
I feel like it's such an essential thing. You talk to psychologists nowadays, and they are very they're wary of only listening to yourself. They call it rumination, and like the challenge, the way that if you're always ruminating on your problems, the additional weight that you give to them. So we have to find a balance between listening and talking. And for me, I'm not a psychologist. I'm not here to help people heal their traumas or anything necessarily like that. I'm here to help people find human language within their listening to provide them with a light and a path forward. And to me, it's that simple. It just requires a very practical approach, which for me is journaling. Like that's my entire approach to it. But it's listening to yourself and it's talking to yourself.
And I like how you say that, Case. It's also using the right language. So, and you say in the book too, it's not just about affirmations, because we can all put stuff on the mirror or make little notes around like, affirming what we want. I want to be confident. You are enough. These things, right? That we can say to ourselves. But you talk about reframing it in a way that is more true or more actionable, right,
Yeah.
Case? So
Yeah.
for example, let's say you do want to be a confident, loving, kind, conscientious person, and successful. How do you talk to yourself so that you are saying it in a way that is more actionable?
Yeah.
Does
Well, I
that
mean, I
make
think the
sense?
biggest thing, talking about the language you use, and as an author who I spend all day, every day thinking about words and how to reflect certain ideas, I'm really not a fan of adjectives. Like, I am at war with adjectives because of their lack of permanence and control. Like, if we're always saying, I want to be confident, or I want to be happy, or I want to be successful, I think we're setting ourselves up for some frustration, because those are all things that could be taken from us. Someone could do something painful to us that makes us feel insecure, not confident. Someone could break up with us, happiness to unhappiness. Someone could not give us that deal at our sales job, we're no longer successful. We can't control those things, and if we shape an identity around being happy or being successful or being confident, we'll then tiptoe our way into humanness, which we start identifying by those things. Well, I guess I'm not a happy person. I guess I'm not successful. I guess I'm insecure. So I'm big on just like going back to square one about the way that we describe ourselves. And it's one of the journal exercises I like to take people through. It's reframing adjectives to verbs. Like, what are the things you can control for being successful, for instance? Instead of saying, I want to be successful or I am successful, you say, I'm the kind of person who, and then you describe it with verbs that no one can take from you, right? I'm the kind of person who, let's say you're working a 9 to 5, I'm the kind of person who always shows up on time, who goes above and beyond, who makes 100 phone calls a day, who, whatever your business KPIs are. No one can take those things from you. The outcome might vary, but no one can take the action from you. And same with like, I want to be loved, for instance. Okay, well, I'm the kind of person who, well, what are the things that you do that would lead to that? Well, I'm the kind of person who's willing to love first. I'm the kind of person who doesn't hold back. I'm, so on and so forth. And it's a little bit cheesy, but I've just seen for me, when I've shifted my goal in life from being happy or whatever it may be to this, it doesn't necessarily change the timeline, but it makes me so much happier along the way because I'm actually controlling those things because I have evidence that those things will lead me to the thing I want. So I think, mindfulness a lot of the times is evidence going through, I have lived through A, therefore I believe B. Let me do more of C so that D could be the direction I go in. So I think a lot of mindfulness is based on evidence and then what you can control and using that to construct your internal dialogue as opposed to some of the more, ethereal stuff of I am light and goodness and I attract, and we can control that. So yeah, I like doing that. Sometimes mindfulness certainly is a sensitive thing. It's all about vulnerability, but it's also about just doing and verbing and constructing your identity around those things because you can control them.
Yes. It's also you're reminding people to question your thoughts. I was thinking about I relate that to Byron Katie. It's like right how she says like, is that true? You keep asking the question,
Yeah.
like so you're questioning your own thoughts. Like you
Yeah.
said, it's like your thoughts may be somebody else's thoughts. Like we're so connected to each other. You could be thinking somebody else's stuff, and it's not even yours, but you're totally internalizing it as yours. It's just the reality.
I mean, that is your life's work, and hopefully you do it early and often. But like, I lead a lot of these journaling sessions, and like the whole point of journaling, for instance, or really any mindful practice that is a self Q&A, the purpose of that is to update your belief systems. Because first of all, you're an
Yes.
entirely different person when you're 20, 25, 30, 35, 40, 45. For me, I'm a different man today at 36 than I was at 33, and so on and so forth. If I'm not stopping and updating my belief systems, my aspirations, my ambitions, the reality is I'm probably living someone else's. And it does not mean I'm a bad person at all. It just means we're doing what comes naturally to humans, which is emulate and copy and be inspired. But, I do. One of the questions that I like to ask is a variety of that. Is what if I'm wrong? Take a belief that you've had for a while, something that like this belief does not make me feel great about myself, right? I'm falling behind, I'm unlovable, I'll never be successful, whatever it is. And then ask yourself, what if I'm wrong? Like, what if I'm wrong about that thing? Then what would the next logical step be? Well, if I'm wrong about being unlovable, then that would mean that there's a partner out there who would love me for everything I have to offer. Well, then what would that mean? Well, then I should probably showcase what I have to offer. And then what would that mean? Like, there's just a whole line of logic that you could follow that changes your life if you're willing to go back to the first step. But often we don't go there. Instead, we go to the end of feeling unlovable. And that's where it gets messy instead of going back to the beginning of asking yourself, what if I'm wrong?
Yes. And I really appreciate what you said about changing our beliefs because that shows that is so important is not sticking to what we know to be true or what we getting our I understand we're all going to have opinions about things, but I do want to be questioning myself. I do want to be growing and changing, and that means changing my belief systems because I want to understand. One of the things that I have been doing way more in my day-to-day life with my relationships is really seeking to understand before wanting to be understood. That's a mindfulness practice right there because we can make assumptions around what people are thinking about us or what they're doing, their actions that may be affecting us. But really, it's like asking the questions rather than jumping to conclusions, which is around shifting beliefs and giving the other person the benefit of the doubt.
Yeah.
There's a whole bunch of stuff.
I love that. I think that's so important and honestly rare and refreshing because there's a whole side of the internet that is just increasingly savage. Like if you're up to date on like
Yes.
meme culture and like inspirational quote culture on the internet, there's all these quotes around how whoever cares first loses. I don't give first. I only match. Like you get what you give. I think it's so backwards. And I did write about it in the book. I believe I wrote
You
the
did
book
write
so
about it
long.
in the
I
book.
wrote about the
You
book.
said
Yeah.
if you care more, like that's what you like boldness includes
Yes.
caring more and having you don't want that regret, right? Go for it.
Because the whole thinking is misguided from the beginning. We think that caring less, matching energy instead of giving first, we think that it's a power move. We think that it gives us more power and we think it protects us. But you take a step back and you realize how flawed that is and how hypocritical that is. Like we think that that gives me more power because now I'll see what they do and then I'll make the decision. You are stripped of all your power the second that you decide that you're always waiting for someone else to act for you to decide what to do with that person. It's an insane mentality. I, of course, understand why we do it because some experience in our past where we gave first, where we were trusting first, where we efforted to understand first instead of being understood, and then it was thrown in our face and it hurt us. we're trying to protect ourselves. Like humans are, we're wired to be hurt once and then do everything in our power to avoid having that be a second time. But mindfulness in this sense would be, what if I'm wrong? And really challenging yourself to see what power and protection really is. Like, I don't, I'm trying to think about what I even wrote in the book. I didn't do a chapter on boundaries. I have a chapter in my upcoming book about boundaries. The idea like, okay, a boundary is about protection. It's about withdrawing. It's about keeping a distance. It's about doing all these things where, for me, I think a boundary is the opposite. It's about allowing yourself to get as close as humanly possible, but to have a boundary, aka a standard that says, if I see this, then I do this. Not the other way around of, keeping yourself safe until they do something and then you do something. No, you go
Right.
all in, you give everything you got, but you've got this strength and this bubble around you that says, once that is not reciprocated, respected, understood, whatever, then I do this. So the idea of a boundary should be that it brings more into your life, not less. But I'd say the majority of the internet has the other way around. You need strong standards and strong boundaries, which means you say no as often as humanly possible, and you are the prize, and you say no, no, no. And I'm a big fan of no, but you say no after you say yes. And I think I don't know. I feel like we miss that point a lot out of the idea of being powerful and protected. But the reality is you're basically waiting for permission. If we're continuing the P alliteration there, it's not power, and it's not protection. It's giving up. It's asking for permission.
Yes.
A lot of peace.
I agree with you. It's a power move. I also, I think that if you are doing things, the word manipulation came to mind. Like you're trying to manipulate people and
Yeah.
situations, to protect yourself or to create an outcome that you're trying to manipulate. So
Yeah.
it's not being open-hearted and vulnerable. You talk a lot about vulnerability in your book, and how a lot of us aren't taught how to be vulnerable. We don't have that skill, but it's a skill that you can learn. And you go into the studies around vulnerability, how we adore and we look up to people that are vulnerable, but we ourselves have a hard time with that. A lot of us, right? Because we're
Yeah.
judging ourselves, going, people aren't going to like my vulnerability. I want you to be vulnerable because I think that that's amazing and beautiful.
Yeah.
But we actually have the wrong perception around people looking at our vulnerability in a negative way.
100%. I mean, I think I give a lot of examples in the book, including the beautiful mess effect, which basically prescribes how hypocritical we are. Not because we're idiots or stupid or anything like that. It's just literally because that's the way we're wired. Like, we're just strangely negative about ourselves, about the same qualities that we love in other people. You meet someone at a party and you're like, wow, that person is quirky and out there and kind of crazy, but I love it. Like, awesome. How refreshing is
Yeah.
that? And then you're like, if I were to be quirky and outrageous and out there, everyone would hate me and I would lose all my friends and yada, yada. So I won't do that. And it's the same with more vanilla traits. Like, man, it's so refreshing when someone's honest with me on a first date instead of lying to me. But I can't be honest on a first date because, that would be too much and too extra. I can't say that I'm dating for marriage on a first date. That's crazy. They're going to think I'm a crazy person. But the same behavior in someone else, we applaud. And I think there's a lot there, of course, that can range from insecurity to something in your childhood or adolescence, or to some avoidant. You could use all the therapy language you want, but at the end of the day, it is an oddly hypocritical thing that we do, and we need to not do it. And I think sometimes it's as simple as understanding, the way that we give kindness to other people on the surface, but withhold that from ourselves so unnecessarily, and
It's
just
true.
doing it. Like, as
Yeah.
much as like we could sit here and talk about how mindfulness is a softening of the soul, and it's an acceptance of yourself. Sometimes I refer to it as like brute force mindfulness. It's you just do the thing. You do the thing. You be cringe. You be awkward. You be embarrassed. You do the thing. I think I have a chapter in there. If not, I wrote it somewhere else about only good things can happen to you when you're vulnerable, when you speak up.
Yes,
You
and
either
bold.
get what
And
you want or you get what you need. and both things serve you every single time. You get what you want. That is, you speak up and you're yourself, or you ask a question of clarity. They give you the answer you want. And they're like, well, thanks for asking that. We're on the same page. Or they say, no, forget it. I don't want to date you. And you got what you need. And now you're free to go out and get what you deserve. Either way, speaking up always serves you. And I think 99% of our problems can be solved with communication, which, we're not going to solve the world's problems with just that statement. But I really do think leaning into vulnerability in the form of conversations is going to solve a lot of your problems, the ones that are downstream, right? Insecurity, doubt, feeling like you're falling behind, all these things. It starts with your willingness to be vulnerable.
Yeah. So I really like this part about the bookcase where you talk about superpowers, how we all have superpowers. But on the flip side of our superpowers is our flaws, very, very often, right? But we don't want to, as humans, like you said, we're super hypercritical of ourselves. So we don't want to identify our flaws, number one, or share them with people, or like, right? Because of course we're all flawed. Are you kidding me? Like there's all good, and there's like lots of stuff that we got to work on, or just like who we are. It's just human nature. But I really liked this. So I was like thinking about myself, and I'm like, okay, Robin, like what things are you naturally good at? Like what are your superpowers? What are you just like your gifts, right? Yeah. And then, okay, what's the flip side of that? So, and I think, I figured out at least one or two this week. Like, it's not that I didn't know, but like, it's really good to be mindful about it,
Yeah.
And I was talking to my boyfriend about this because I have kind of said to myself and other people a lot in my life that I'm impatient. Like I like to get shit done. Yeah. And it's like and when stuff's going a slow pace in my life, I'm like, come on, let's go. Right. I want to see like something coming back, like from my actions or whatever. Okay. But that doesn't mean that I'm like a super impatient person all the time. Like I'm pretty chill, like in life settings. Let's just say, like, I'm not like demanding something in a restaurant. Like, no way. Like, I don't go around doing that. So maybe it's more the flip side of my get her done and be determination is the flaw is more like I have a hard time being quite chill and relaxed and being like just having more space in my life. So that is what I'm actually working on recently is having more space and peace and downtime and rest.
Yeah. And that is, first of all, me too. If you were to ask me mine, I would say impatience as well. I think it just backs up the idea of the need for balance for one. And just like, you think about it like, I was never good at science, so this might be off base, but it's like everything you do has a reaction down the line, right? So if you are a kind person, and kindness is who you are, it's not a tactic, it's not a strategy, it's genuinely who you are, there is always going to be a downside to these things. And I'm a huge glass half full optimist guy. I'm not being
Me too. I'm overflowing.
Always, right.
Yeah.
You just pour more into But like, you got to understand that, there will inevitably be people who try to take advantage of it. There will be people who misunderstand you. There will be people who call you naive. That is always a reality. Same with like impatience, for instance. Like I'm an impatient person, which means I try to do a lot, which does mean I get a lot of shit done. But at the same time, it often makes me feel like I'm falling behind. Balance. It'll always be the case. What do we do with that piece of information? Well, I think it just matters now which one we focus on. If we're always focused on the latter, about how people take advantage of kindness, about how I always feel like I'm falling behind, we'll then continue to find more evidence of that, and that will become our identity. So, I'm never that guy who says happiness is a choice. I lean towards that, of course. But I think there is a lot to be said about where we focus our thoughts within the balance of life, which will always be good and bad, half full and half empty, right? It's the same thing, but it's just depending on your point of view. And I think we just need to understand that and make a decision to focus on one or the other, and then realize Psychology 101 about how we will then go out into the world and find support of that. Which would you rather find support of? That your kindness is valid and a powerful thing and a superpower? Or that it's something that you need to give up because there's mean people out there who are spiteful and looking to take advantage of it. You could find evidence of either which one. I choose the more optimistic one. Not everyone can do that at the flip of a switch, but I think we could all realize that there's a balance and understanding where the balance comes from, as opposed to just believing that one is good and one is inevitable, I think can really, really serve us.
Yeah, I really like that. Okay, so I know you touched it about dating in the beginning, and I wanted to talk to you about this because in the book, and you said, you've got a lot of people that you're in touch with that are talking to you about their dating stories and how, like I think online dating, there's a big, there's a lot of good. I met my boyfriend on online dating, and past partners. So I think there can be great success with online dating, but I think there's also some issues, big time, or just maybe it's how people are showing up in general, right? They're not shooting their shot, or they're not. And so two of the commonalities between my best friend Kirsten and I, we were talking about our online dating experience, is not is this lack of good communication, or maybe not being
Yeah.
bold. Like you said, that's the name of your book. That's bold of you. Like, be bold, take that risk. And both my boyfriend as well as the person that Kirsten's dating right now said that women weren't messaging the men. Like, they both said, like, nobody messaged me. Like, you're the first one to ever like comment on a picture or be like, hey, how's your day going? I really like that, or ask a question. So people aren't. Do you hear that a lot, Case?
Yeah.
Around
Yeah.
that experience, like people are just kind of like laissez faire, like you, like little heart, and hope it goes well. Like, well, how are you going to get the result if you're not
Yeah.
putting in the effort?
Yeah, I try to stay on top of this kind of topic as much as I can. And there's so many different sides of the internet and people, right? There's
Yes.
sides that say women have all the power in online dating. There's sides that say men have all the power. I don't, I'm not into like men versus women. I do
No.
know that in talking with a lot of men and women, I think, sometimes for women, I'm a big fan of traditional gender roles. I'm a big fan of men taking the lead and doing the thing. I think that's great. I don't, there's no problem for a woman to make the first quote move, we're putting it in quotes, by sending a DM, making a comment, and then letting the guy lead. There's no problem with that. And I would say, the majority of men don't get compliments. I always used to make the joke that I've worn the same shirt for a decade because, when I was 22, some girl complimented it. Like, guys just don't get a lot of compliments. So as a woman, if you're interested in a guy, you could set yourself so apart so quickly by just a quick compliment, or not even a compliment, just making a first statement or a first comment. And that's the high level, very basic thing. I'm not a big, like, give tactical dating advice kind of
Yeah.
guy, like, whatever. But I think there's also something there to be said about, like, this idea, men or women, thinking that like eagerness or transparency is not romantic. Like this thing that, well, my partner should just know, or my soulmate, I'll bump into them and it'll just become this magical thing and no effort is required. Like, I think the sexiest thing in the world is feedback and saying this makes me feel loved, or I like it when you do this, or this, that, and the other. That is, we have a lot of people, and sometimes women, they say that, well, that's not romantic. He should just know that, for instance. And I
He's
and
not a
I
mind reader.
we're not bad people for saying that, but it's just so misguided because someone who's trying to love you, you think about what someone gives when they're loving someone. They give what they know, they give what they have, and they give what they used to give their former partner. They're just trying to make educated guesses at making you feel loved. They genuinely want to love you, but the only way to truly love you in a way that makes you feel loved, because there's a huge difference between being loved and feeling loved. A lot of difficult conversations there, but the only way to find the discrepancy between the two is to say, hey, this makes me feel loved. I really like it when you do this, that, and the other. And someone who wants to love you will be so grateful for that. And they'll say, wow, thank you so much for giving me this thing. You just told me how to love you. Now I'm going to do it. What is more romantic than receiving feedback and then actually doing it? So I think we need to get out of this
Yes.
weird headspace where we think that a soulmate, a true romantic, requires no guidance and that they should just know. I think that is such a fast trip zone to having these standards that can never be achieved. So back to the communication idea, it's also that. But yeah, maybe that answers your question. I can go on and on about that.
I think what it comes down to is the more transparent and honest you can be, and kindness, of course, has to be like the thread throughout all of this. Even just like I just think this whole thing about ghosting. Give me a break. You know what? you want to treat people the way you want to be treated, right? The golden rule. Let's just keep that going in the world, please, people. Like if you're not into somebody, it's just like you can say it very kindly. Like, thank you so much for our date. I don't think this is you're my person, but I really wish you well. It's that easy and very kind.
Well, one
Yeah.
would think.
Well, it's not easy. It may not be easy, okay? But it is kind, and it's how you would want to be
Yeah,
treated.
and yeah, and from there you accept it and you move on with your life. You do not try to convince
Yeah.
them otherwise. You don't haggle. You don't negotiate. You don't do any of that nonsense. And you're thankful that they did it, so you don't waste any more time. So yeah, I mean we're in
Yeah.
a midst of all that kind of stuff, but I think it's important to take all of that in stride. Like dating apps are amazing. What a crazy time to be alive, where if you want to meet a partner, you could do so from your sofa without requiring someone to introduce you,
Yeah.
without any of this nonsense. At the same time, it is filled with nonsense. So again, we're talking about balance. Everything is about balance. And then from there, it's about what you choose to believe. Like I I'm on social media a lot just for the purpose of, trying to keep my the finger on the pulse of culture and dating. And there's just so many people that live in the extremes. They've been hurt by a couple people. They've been ghosted a few times. They had a couple bad dating stories. And now all of a sudden, all men are garbage. All women are crazy, whatever it is. And there's no room for goodness in there. So, it is, I hate to be that guy who's like, it's all about the story you tell yourself. But if you're telling yourself a story that every man is garbage and every man will lie to you, or every woman's crazy and every woman will cheat on you, what room are you leaving in reality that would be the opposite of that? Like, I'm not a huge like spiritual manifester kind of guy, because again, I'm still a little hesitant on words like abundance and things like that, but I do believe strongly in the idea of manifestation, which is simply the aligning of what you tell yourself and what you want reality to give you. If you tell yourself that no one is capable of loving you because everyone is shit and everyone's a liar, logically, it does not make sense that you could then walk out of your home and into reality and expect something different. Like, logically, we just can't say that that would exist. You can't tell yourself one story and then hope that the opposite is out there for you. We have to tell ourselves the same story, no matter if it's difficult, no matter if it's the opposite of what our past experiences have told us. We have to find a way to dig deep and believe in that. And I just find a lot of people don't right now, which kind of makes me a little bit sad. And I'm actually working on a new book that's coming out next year that goes back to the very as early as we possibly can to really reevaluate why love in general. But I think we really do need to check ourselves and not fall into those camps of all this or all that or inevitability this or whatever it may be. I think that just gets in our way and serves no purpose.
Yeah, I agree. So you did a big survey or questionnaire, right? Where you conducted a survey where you asked people what they were lacking. And you got like thousands of responses. You were reading all the comments, right? And people are saying things like financial stability, my love life is a disaster. And you're like, okay, this is, and so many people felt a lack in a certain part of their lives. And I imagine anybody can identify, okay, what am I lack? Where's my lack in my life, right? And then this was interesting case where you went on to their profiles and you were able to see, okay, it's funny. You said financial stability, something you feel like you're lacking, but you're showing on social media, you're driving this nice car and you're on this nice vacation. Oh, there's your house. Wow. Okay. Like this does not appear to be financial instability. And then
Yeah.
that woman who said like, my love life is just in the dumps. She's got, pictures of her with men or people and lots of friends. And she just looks like she's having a really, that doesn't appear on social media to be the
Right.
case.
Right.
So I think this points a lot to, there's two underlying themes I thought, or messages or reminders I got from what you're writing about in this part is around comparison and how, it's the thief of joy, you say, which I
Yep.
fully agree. When we're continuously comparing ourselves to other people, it's like, no. And the other reminder to me is like, We all have shit. We all have problems in life, in some area of our life. And life is hard. Like it really, life can be very hard. Not all the time and not in all areas of our lives, but we all have challenges. So that picture perfect Instagram profile, it's not true.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
But we are surrounded by it and inundated by it, by thinking that everybody else has a better life than us, or we're not doing enough, or we're not doing. I don't. Right?
Yeah. That is why, like, you think about comparison, definitely the thief of joy, but it's also just like misplaced. It's just like it's one thing
Misplaced.
if you can compare yourself to something that you know the full story of, you have 100% transparency into it. Okay, maybe there's some grounds there to compare. But for the most part, we never have access to that. So any comparison you're making is inherently unfair to you because you don't know anything about the other side. Like that exercise showcased that nicely. Not that those people are liars or bad people. It's just there's always a
No.
discrepancy between what you show, which, yeah, why would you show something bad, and the reality. So, again, I think that the topic we're touching on here is that there's always sides to what you can believe, and there's one that's inherently going to pull you down, and there's one that offers a little bit more humanity and optimism to your belief system, and it just requires taking a step back and challenging assumptions. I think assumptions are just the worst thing ever, and now that I wrote that book a year and a half ago, I would probably add to it, the idea of comparison, the idea of envy, the idea of jealousy. I don't think this is an original thought to me, but if you're going to envy someone else's what they have, or at least what they present to have, you have to also be envious of how they got there, right? So if you look at someone and they are rich and successful, you also have to be envious of how they got there, which is a lot of hard work, probably a lot of failure, probably a lot of flop. If you're going to be envious of someone in a happy relationship, well, it's fairly unlikely that they struck gold the first time. You probably have to be envious of the heartbreak that gave them standards and perspective so that they can find their partner. And we very much skip that step. So I think if there's
Right.
levels of accountability that you can hold yourself to, the first is I am not blindly comparing myself to anyone because I do not know the full story, and because of that, it is unfair to me. And the second would be if I choose to move forward and compare myself to these people, I also have to compare myself to the less glamorous parts of their story, the path that got them to the point that I am envious of. And I think a lot of that makes you like, okay, well, maybe I'm good, or maybe you could find some commonality, and you're like, well, yeah, now that I know that they're CEO of this company, and I know that they got fired 3 times and they had a startup fail, and I could find some commonality with their story and mine. I'm kind of on my grind right now, and you kind of find the commonality there, and it gives you a sense of empathy, and you don't feel alone. So I think there's so much goodness that you could find in these decisions. It's all about the decision that you make, and it's all about where your focus goes.
So the title of your book is "That's Bold of You." So tell us, what does bold mean to you? What does it mean to be bold?
I mean, I think in general, it's challenging assumptions. I mean, the book, at its core, I would say, is about identities, right? Challenging who you've been told to be, who you've been told you are, and who you've conditioned yourself to think you are. Likely the negative versions, right? And I think it's a bold thing to challenge that because it's so easy to have someone tell you that you're too loud or too quiet, or an ex to tell you that you're difficult to love, or a boss tell you that you're too ambitious or whatever, and to internalize those things, and then to our conversation to go out and find evidence of it and never go back from there. So I think it's a very bold thing to challenge that and say, maybe I am too loud, but that's who I am, and here's the goodness that comes from it. Or maybe I'm not, and that's just a completely wrong statement, and I'm not going to believe it and live my life by what someone else said and I almost believed. I think it's a bold thing to do that. And I think it's a bold thing to challenge assumptions in any area of life, what you've been told, what you believe, what your parents expect of you, what society tells you. I think that will never not be a bold thing because it's easy to accept those things. And anything that's not easy, I would say, requires a modicum of boldness. And identities are all about boldness, about updating your belief systems, reinventing yourself. And that's not easy because it will always require you to leave some element of comfort, and perhaps people and relationships. And that's a bold thing.
Yeah. So before we end, I wanted to talk about something you share in the book about this. It's called Masogi. mindset,
Yes. Yep.
right? So
Yep.
this is all about like taking action today. Like act today. If it
Yep.
scares you, do it. Right? Like just and because whatever like what we fear on the other side of that fear is likely something that's really good for us. Like staying in the comfort zone, we can only do that for so long. We need to challenge ourselves, right? So what? Tell us about the Masogi mindset.
Yeah, so basically that's something. It's a Japanese term, but it's kind of been co-opted in a good way by fitness culture and kind of gym bro endurance athlete culture, where people will
Oh,
set
really? I'd
sort of
never heard of it before this. So
yeah. It's like
okay.
people like marathon runners or endurance athletes. They'll give themselves like a big Masogi challenge for the year, where they're like every year some cadence they'll do something super difficult, and they'll train for it for a while, like doing 3 marathons in a day, or do crazy stuff, just like really hardo type stuff. And it's cool. Like it's cool to be inspired by these people. Not really my cup of tea, but I remember reading about that and I was like, well, that's cool, man. Like set something super difficult where your chances of failing are really high, but the challenge of doing that would be really rewarding. I was like, and that's pretty cool. But the thing that didn't really resonate with me was the fact that you do it like once a year or something. And
Yeah.
I wasn't going to be like, well, you should do it every day. But I was like, well, what if you just approached everyday life with a Masogi mindset that says, if it's difficult, you got to do it, and just see difficult as the attraction, not something to run from. And I know that that's cheesy to be like do difficult things in life, but like my guiding light truly is do difficult things. Like you got to do difficult things. If it's a difficult thing, you've got to do it. Like that is the sign that you have to do it. That it is difficult. For every reason that any motivational speaker will tell you, that good things come from difficult things. It's how you prove what you're capable of, so on and so forth. But especially in light of identities and having difficult conversations and speaking up and asking for clarity in relationships, it will always require that. So why not make that your misogi as often as you can in your life, and just have it be a perpetual mindset instead of something you do periodically? So for me,
I
it was really
really
that. I mean, you could draw any parallels you want to like, who has it? Like Mel Robbins has her like 5-10 second rule or whatever it is. Like, if it's difficult and it's on your radar, you act on it as fast as you can. You don't let it sit. You don't push it off from now. You just do it. You try to take a step forward, and from there, your willingness to do those things only gets stronger. Your aversion to it gets weaker, and you start to see, back to the beginning, the kind of person you are. You do the difficult things. I'm the kind of person who does the difficult things. If you want to prescribe a default mentality to being happy, successful, confident, I would say it's that. I'm the kind of person who does difficult things, and those things will, not magically, but they will align eventually. I am convinced of that.
Oh, I really like that. If there was ever a hard conversation or if something had to get done, my family, like my brother, for instance, he knows like just Robin will do it. Like she like,
Nice.
just push her in the
Quality.
front and she will do
Yeah.
it. So like that's a good, I'm the same way. But I do want to read this paragraph because I think it kind of, it describes what you're talking about for everybody that's listening. Keep this word, which is misogi, and it's redefining power in your back pocket. The next time you're tempted to talk yourself out of something because it challenges you deeply, or it opens you up to failure, disappointment, or rejection, before you retreat and start listing all the reasons why not to do it, say Masogi. So I really like that.
Say it out loud. Be a weirdo.
Masogi. Yes, be weird, be bold. Well, I really appreciate your time and all the great work you're doing in this world, Case, because really you are, you say an eternal optimist. I'm the same way, but you also give people like really like powerful action steps to be bold and to take those daily steps. Take the risks I think are necessary to grow in life. So
Well, thank you.
I appreciate that,
Yeah,
and I appreciate you.
I appreciate that. Yeah, and great conversation. Yeah, I mean that's what I'm all about. Mindfulness on its own is incredibly powerful, but turning it into practical is where you really see the magic of it. So that's what I try to do. So thank you.
Yeah, we have to have tools to do it, right?
Yes.
So I always close every podcast with a blessing, and it's really with your words. So this blessing is also co-written by Case Kenny. So may we remember there is beauty in vulnerability, Vulnerability is a superpower. May we remember that a happy life is not always about more or better. It can be about being different or simpler. And may we be bold enough to embrace the fact that we are exactly who we're supposed to be. And that is never too much. Right?
Preach it. Preach it. I believe it. I do.
I do too. Thank you, Case.
Of course. Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much for listening. Visit realloveready.com to continue learning with us. Please rate and review this podcast. Your feedback helps us get you the tools and guidance you need to form more loving relationships and create positive change in your life. We at Real Love Ready acknowledge and express gratitude for the Coast Salish people, the stewards of the land on which we work and play, and encourage you to take a moment to acknowledge and express gratitude for those that have stewarded and continue to steward the land that you live on as well. Many blessings and much love.